Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Corombos of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three martinis coming up.
Very glad you're with us for the Thursday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. We've got a lot to talk about today, including how progressive policies towards equity are ruining schools even further. We'll have a perfect example from San Francisco on that. We'll also be looking at how Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser, not a favorite here on the Three Martini Lunch, has just suddenly reevaluated whether or not she wants D.C. to be a sanctuary city. She's moving in the right direction, but the question is why? And then we're going to have a very interesting comment from one of the Israeli hostages who had been held by Hamas for well over a year, talking about the difference that the U.S. election made and how he was treated by Hamas. But Jim, I know you follow the Maha movement and the Morning Jolt, and we talked about RFK Jr.'s swim in Rock Creek, which raised some eyebrows a couple weeks ago. You found a little extra stuff that has you scratching your head.
Think of this as a bonus crazy martini. This is from the site Notice News of the United States, not POTUS, saying that Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., his commission, Make America Healthy Again, issued a report, said it cited gold standard science, citing more than 500 studies. And now Notice is reporting that 7 of the cited sources don't appear to exist at all, making people wonder if AI was involved. AI can have hallucinations, and there was that reading list put out by the Chicago Sun-Times that, recommended a whole bunch of books that didn't exist and stuff. Nobody knows exactly why this is, but I just want to point out, Greg, I am deeply disappointed. Not that, I'm not surprised that there's quack science in it. I'm just disappointed that they were lazy and they didn't actually look up the actual, quack reports. If you're going to spread misinformation, put some effort into it. All right. I expect better from people who are trying to spread false information and bad health advice to Americans. So tisk, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and HHS, I expect better bad work from you.
We have very high standards here at the Three Martini Lunch, and we expect you to rise to those standards. But we will have a very good review of President Trump here in just a second. But first, we need to talk about fast-growing trees. And Fast Growing Trees, as you should know by now, is the biggest online nursery in the United States with thousands of different plants and more than 2 million happy customers. Count the Corombos family among those 2 million happy customers. I've spoken about our new snake plant. It looks fantastic. It looks healthy. It looks strong. Came packaged in a great way, so when you pull it out of the box, it doesn't make a mess. It was very easy to do. We've also had very good luck with the spice plants and the big leafy monstera plant and the lemon plant. All great stuff, and you can find that and a whole lot more at Fast Growing Trees, where you're supporting an American company that partners with American growers.
Whether you're looking to add privacy or shade or natural beauty to your yard, or now you have a giant empty space because your tree fell into your neighbor's house and crushed the walk-in closet, to pick a hypothetical example, Fast Growing Trees has in-house experts who are ready to help you make the right decision and keep away wood rot, with plant experts on call to offer growing and care advice.
Yes, Jim has discovered very much how important this expertise is in your yard and your neighbor's yard. This spring, get up to 50% off select plants at fastgrowingtrees.com/martini. Plus, use the code Martini at checkout for an extra 15% off your first purchase. Visit fastgrowingtrees.com/martini and use the code Martini. Now is the perfect time to plant. This offer is valid for a limited time, though. Terms apply. fastgrowingtrees.com/martini. All right, Jim, on to our first martini, and a very good martini. This one comes from an interview with Omer Shem Tov. Hopefully I'm not butchering that pronunciation. He was held hostage by Hamas for more than 500 days. And in an interview here, unfortunately, I'm not sure who this is with. Hats off to Ryan Saavedra for flagging this story. But he's talking about how his treatment at the hands of Hamas changed drastically when Trump was elected and after Trump took office.
They were very scared of him. Yeah, they wanted...
Who?
The terrorists.
We're afraid of Trump.
Yeah, they wanted Kamala to be chosen, to be elected.
You talked politics with them?
Yeah. They wanted Kamala to be elected. But as soon as Donald Trump was elected, they understood that he wants to bring the hostages back home. Yeah. So immediately the way they treated me changed. So if it's the amount of food, I could say this, that when Trump became president, the way they treated us changed. For me, personally, this is what I
think
felt.
because they anticipated that a deal would come soon.
Yeah.
And that's when they started giving you more food.
Exactly. More food, treated me better, stopped cursing me, stopped spitting on me.
So you not only get a sense of the change there, you also get a sense of how horribly he and others were treated for a very long time. So, Jim, it's a massive indictment of the Biden administration that Hamas apparently didn't take their approach to this issue seriously really at all. And it's also a great credit to the Trump administration, where even before he was in office, Hamas is like, oh, we better start treating these people better so they look better when we release them, because that's probably coming once this guy's in the White House.
Yeah, score one for the madman theory. The idea that, if a U.S. president behaves insanely, then no one really knows what to expect and is a little bit less likely to try brinksmanship with him. I'm not surprised. We knew what the Biden administration's policy was, starting out very supportive of Israel. And then as it turned into a political liability, increasing distance between Biden and Netanyahu and more criticism and the withholding of arms and stuff like that. And it was a little noticed comment, but in the closing days of the Biden administration, Secretary of State Anthony Blinken had said that every time there'd be some sort of disagreement between the Biden administration and Israel, Hamas would walk away from the table of negotiations. That basically they saw, okay, it's not a unified front. The U.S. is not going to pressure Israel. We can negotiate a separate peace, so to speak. We can get what we want from these guys. Also, I want to point out, it comes up very at the end of the Tapper and Thompson book, Original Sin, but there are real consequences to having a U.S. president who's only good from 10 to 4 or whatever that, the limited number of working hours was. And what it was is the president, it's not that the president, never said you should release the hostages. Every once in a while we get a don't. But that clearly was not particularly intimidating to Hamas or I think anybody else. Harris, I don't recall her focusing on the hostages a great deal. I don't just recall her focusing a great deal on foreign policy in general, particularly in her first couple speeches. Remember that she seemed to be hiding from interviews and all that kind of stuff. I don't think any of that strengthens the hand of a potential president. I don't think any of that sends a particularly intimidating signal to Hamas or to anybody else around the globe. So it's not surprising they felt like they could roll her too. I suspect, though, considering how there were at least 2 Biden administration officials who appear to have been working for the Iranian government through their group, the International Strategy Group, whatever the name of that group was. I'm sure there are some people looking at this, so Hamas wanted Harris to win. Where was that endorsement when we needed it?
There's a few people in the Democratic Party that probably would have been perfectly happy to
there
get
goes
that endorsement,
Michigan.
Sadly.
Sorry to take that shot at your home state. The Hamas endorsement might be helpful in certain city council races
But yeah, absolute indictment of Team Biden. They didn't obviously quake in their boots at the words or sight of Tony Blinken or Jake Sullivan, and shaped up real fast once Kamala Harris lost. And so the fact that they were literally cheering for the incumbent administration showed just how little they respected and feared them. That changed a lot. So one thing where you'll learn a good worldview, which is important in foreign policy and other aspects of life, including economics, Hillsdale College, where you will not learn that capitalism is evil and run by greedy people who oppress and exploit the poor and the masses. That's nonsense you'll hear at a lot of other colleges. At Hillsdale College, they'll explain how capitalism actually works and why it is the system that has created the most wealth by far in the history of our world and here in the United States. And at Hillsdale, you can take this class for free, Understanding Capitalism.
Hillsdale College is now offering more than 40 free online courses. That's right, free. You can learn about the U.S. Constitution, the stories in the book of Genesis, the rise and fall of the Roman Republic, or the history of the ancient Christian church, all with Hillsdale College's free online courses.
In these 7 lectures, you'll learn about things like how human nature plays a role in our economic system, why capitalism depends on private property rights, and why capitalism is ultimately a system that encourages morality. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/martini to enroll in this course, Understanding Capitalism. There is no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/martini to enroll for free. All right, Jim, on to our second martini now, and we've had some difficulty classifying this. Overall, it's good. The question is, Why is she doing this now? Muriel Bowser is the D.C. mayor. She's been there at least 2 terms, and as far as I know, she's planning to run for re-election again in 2026, so I may have just answered my own question. But according to Axios, Mayor Bowser is seeking to quietly overturn D.C.'s sanctuary city law, proposing to remove the ban on local police assisting with deportations. The D.C. current law prohibits the city from inquiring about a detained person's immigration status or releasing them to ICE. It also prevents D.C. from allowing ICE to interview a suspect in local custody without a judicial order. Bowser's office is not responding to requests for comment. Ultimately, this will be determined by the city council because they determine what the budget is. But of course, the mayor and the council can fight about that. So we'll see how much she wants to fight about that if the council doesn't go along with it. But Jim, you got these people like Eric Adams, you got people like Muriel Bowser, maybe some other mayors around the country. They want to be on the soapbox. They want to talk about how much they're resisting Trump with the closed fist, and then reality smacks them in the face.
So Muriel Bowser had one of the comments that always stuck in my mind as maybe one of the most egregious responses by a large city mayor objecting to the migrants being bused to their cities. Back when Abbott and then later DeSantis and other Republican governors started shipping them up north, she had the comment, oh, look, we're not equipped to handle this. We're not a border city. And I remember sitting there thinking, oh yeah, like El Paso is just awash in extra money to handle, housing and medical care and food and taking care of all these people. I'm sure, DC feels like it's strapped for cash. Every city feels like it's strapped for cash. So why would you think that other places were better equipped? Think about all the tourism revenue DC gets, right? Like there's all kinds of advantages you have as a national capital that other cities don't have. So Bowser always stood out as someone who was really not great on this issue. I'm also struck by the lament of, they're not, the observation they're not responding. If you're making a sweeping change like this, you should not tuck this into the tiny corner of your budgetary request. Even if she said, you know what, we have a new administration in town that hates sanctuary cities and I want to smooth over the relationship with the administration, that'd be perfectly justifiable. If she says, nothing I believe has actually changed, but I have to adjust to the political reality, I think everybody would respect that. Just trying to do this in the dark of night with, shuffling it in so nobody notices, that's zero respect. But I also get the feeling, Greg, sanctuary cities are just so out right now. They're so out of style. They were the hot fashion a couple of years ago in the traditional pop culture weird segues of our podcast. So this summer, Disney Plus is going to showcase the show Ironheart, about a young, brilliant African-American woman who builds an Iron Man type suit and goes out and saves the day. So they had the idea for this apparently back in 2018, and Marvel Studios announced they were going to make the show in December 2020. Now, I ask listeners to think about the political culture in 2020. Think about there was the year of COVID. That was the year of Black Lives Matter. That was the year of probably, you could argue which year you characterize as peak woke, but I think 2020 was somewhere in that neighborhood. They sat on the shelf. They filmed it, and it's been sitting around for a couple of years, and now they're releasing it in summer, which is traditionally not a great time of year for TV viewing. And the widespread perception amongst Marvel fans is that Marvel's like, well, we got to put this out. And people are saying, look, I haven't seen it. That hasn't started airing there. But a lot of people say, judging by the trailer, it feels like a relic of a different time. Now, look, maybe it's a great show. Maybe it turns out to be not woke or something like that. But people are just kind of observing that the political culture changed a lot in a 5-year span. So if you're making something like sanctuary cities were really cool 5 years ago. They were hot. They were, in fashion. They were cool. Now they are bell bottoms. They are not in style. Nobody wants to be shown wearing last year's cool immigration policies. Totally out of style. The reason this is our not so great martini is just like this feels very cynical. And if she had come out and said, you know what, I've looked at this. Our experience with the migrant crisis taught us that we cannot afford to continue to do this. We need to enforce immigration laws. Hey, God bless you, Muriel Bowser. That would make me very much more supportive. The fact that she's trying to do this in the middle of the night in a way that nobody notices does not lend credence to the idea that she's got the best of intentions here.
She may be reading the results from major metropolitan areas that still went blue, but not nearly as deeply blue as they did before. New York still went for Harris. Chicago still went for Harris, but not nearly by the numbers because Greg Abbott and others were sending the illegals to these places because they were the sanctuary cities. And then all of a sudden, their own residents are saying, what are you doing with these policies? This is completely overwhelming our communities, and you're giving them preferential treatment to us. We've been struggling here for years. And so maybe Muriel Bowser is reading that as well. At the same time, if she is now anti-sanctuary city, that could open up a lane, especially in a city like D.C., where you can't be left enough in most elections, for somebody to run to her left and potentially create a problem in the primary, because there really is no Republican Party in D.C. And lastly, Jim, just a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about how Arlington was ending cooperation with ICE even for suspected terrorists and traffickers, which means if Bowser gets her way, D.C. is more conservative than Arlington.
What are you doing, Arlington? What do you... Before I lived out in Turkey, I lived in Washington, D.C., and then I moved to Old Town, to Alexandria, not the Old Town part. The rich people live there. I lived on the wrong side of the tracks in Alexandria. It was much better. I got governed by a much better class of socialists out there. Now I'm in Fairfax, and now there's even occasionally a reasonable centrist here and there. In the best of circumstances, it's a 50-50 county. This is the most conservative place I've lived in years.
Yeah, it's not exactly 50-50 in most races, but the further away you get from D.C., the better chance you have of getting somebody who's sane. So we always hope for that. But watching the debates over things like sanctuary cities and other hot-button topics where the media clearly has one side, especially the stronger the Republicans have their position, the media, for the most part, want to be on the other side. And that's why you need a site like Ground News. They don't create their own news. They evaluate and kind of catalog the news coming from other news sources. They go through a rigorous process to decide whether that outlet generally leans right, left, or center. And then they'll point out kind of the biased language in the articles. We talked earlier in the week about the story of NPR suing the Trump administration and calling it a constitutional crisis and other really charged words to try and get their audience to have a perspective on the issue based on how they reported their news, not their opinion section, their news. And so if you want to get the facts of the story and figure out where the slant's coming from these different sources, Ground News is the way to go.
Unlike the mainstream narrative coming from the news sources you're used to, Ground News puts you in a position to choose and compare the news you want to read while giving you a peek into what's being reported on the opposite side of the political spectrum. With Ground News, you get details about the source of your information, including if the news outlet has a political bent, how reliable their reporting is, and who owns them, empowering you to compare how different news sources from around the world cover the same story.
Visit groundnews.com/martini today to get 40% off the Ground News Vantage plan and get access to all of their news analysis features. That's groundnews.com/martini for 40% off the Ground News Vantage plan for a limited time only.
Do you think you can afford your own car payment? The Watchdog on Wall Street podcast with Chris Markowski. Every day, Chris helps unpack the connection between politics and the economy and how it affects your wallet. Auto delinquency rates are at their highest level ever recorded. People are stretched as auto prices aren't coming down. Make sure you can afford or you get repoed. Whether it's happening in D.C. or down on Wall Street, it's affecting you financially. Be informed. Check out the Watchdog on Wall Street podcast with Chris Markowski on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, Jim. So we talked about a far left politician moving a little less left, at least for the moment, on sanctuary cities. Now let's find out what happens when the left has no resistance whatsoever as they try to implement their policies. And we head to San Francisco, where the schools out there are implementing what's called grading for equity. And here's what the Voice of San Francisco writes to describe this program. Without seeking approval of the San Francisco Board of Education, that's a good premise right there, Superintendent of Schools Maria Su plans to unveil a new grading for equity plan Tuesday that will go into effect this fall at 14 high schools and cover more than 10,000 students. The school district is already negotiating with an outside consultant to train teachers in August in a system that awards a passing grade of C to as low of a score as 41 on a 100-point exam. Grading for equity eliminates homework or weekly tests from being counted in a student's final semester grade. All that matters is how the student scores on a final examination, which can be taken multiple times. Students can be late turning in an assignment or showing up to class or not showing up at all without it affecting their academic grade. Currently, a student needs a 90 for an A and at least a 61 for a D. Under the San Leandro Unified School District's grading for equity system touted by the San Francisco Unified School District and its consultant, a student with a score as low as an 80 can attain an A and as low as 21 can pass with a D. So, Jim, At this point, why even have schools? If you're just going to reward people for not doing anything, what's the point?
So I have two really pressing questions as soon as I heard about this proposal, Greg. The first one was, where was this when I needed it? In Spanish class, I generated more C's than an agreeable Mexican. 21 is a D. I could have gotten that, right? Think about it. Even on a Scantron, usually there's 4 options, right? So if you're just picking randomly, you should get a 25. So like worst case scenario, you're looking at a D plus just by randomly guessing. If you can eliminate one of them, you're doing 1 out of 3, you're at a 33%. Now you're almost to a C. Just the littlest bit of luck, littlest bit of studying, you hit that 41. Gentlemen C, you're doing great. As much as I would have liked to have this, I also kind of recognize I probably wouldn't learn very much if you lower the standards. The editors of National Review wrote an editorial about this, highly critical as you'd imagine. They point out that a different school system, Dublin Unified, removed zeros given for missing assignments. Again, could have used that maybe a generation ago. Granted a minimum 50% for any reasonably attempted assignment. Now, it just says that in quotes. So just how low is the standard for reasonably attempted? If the student tries and does really badly, the argument of should that be higher than a missed assignment? Okay, sure. We all know that you get 200 points on the SAT for signing your name. So now we're giving them 50%. Also, that kind of devalues actual achievements. Like, let's imagine you're the brightest kid over in San Francisco. You work really hard and you end up getting 100% right. So you get an A. But the kid who didn't study quite as hard and got an 80 also gets an A. Now, no one ever accused me of being a curve wrecker. I loved the curved. I love getting this automatic bonus 20. It's like finding money in a pocket. You forgot to, there's 20 points on my test that I didn't even know I was going to get because of the curve. And I will make one other argument in favor of curves. If everybody in the class takes the test and the highest score is a 79, maybe that's a sign that something in the teaching process didn't work. Maybe the kids didn't understand the concept or something like that. But the idea of, this is basically enacting a curve where you're getting 20 points. If you get an 80, you're getting an A, everything's fine. 41 is a C, by that standard, Greg, the Jets and Bears have made the playoffs a lot.
If you're scoring lower than what Michael Jordan used to average per game, you really shouldn't be passing. I mean, Jordan's numbers were high, so that's a bit better standard than what San Francisco has. But come on, people. If you don't expect more, you're not going to get more. And then we release these people into society, and they're not much use to us in terms of improving our communities. So,
first of all, how do you think how do you think college admissions offices are going to look? Yeah, I got straight A's in San Francisco public schools. Right. So it's it's like being the tallest building in Topeka. Apologies to all of our Topeka listeners.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Please be sure to subscribe to the podcast if you don't already. Please tell your friends about us as well. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch Podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Greg Corombos. Have a great Thursday and join us again on Friday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.